Benjamin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So I'm super excited to interview you. You know, I've been following you for a while on Medium, and every time I read one of your posts or have read, one of your books, it just makes me think so deeply and really step back and really evaluate who I am and where I'm going. And I appreciate that deep thought.
Thank you. I'm glad. I like to challenge people to think pretty hard about things. So I'm glad that it's had that effect.
Totally. And it resonates with me because my philosophy is that, I want to be out there. My mission is to help people think and act more strategically. And I think that's exactly, what you're doing as well, is asking those pertinent questions and really helping people to be more intentional about what they create.
100%. Yep. Love it. Yep. I want people to be very intentional about how they live every day and about what they're going for.
So let's talk about, first about you and how did you get so passionate about helping people to live intentionally?
Yeah. A lot of things, really. I would say,
What was the breaking point? There's always a juicy personal story behind.
I've got some juicy stories, which I share in my books, but I will briefly share and I'll highlight the high points. So one being, my parents' extreme divorce, which was obviously very pivotal in my life.
How old were you?
I was 11. I'm the oldest of three boys, was 11 years old. We grew up in a pretty religious family, and the divorce was just crazy. Like, both my parents became totally different people, like immediately. My father became an extreme drug addict, extreme drug addict, like all the above. My mom was zero religion at all. It was really interesting, but both amazing people. It was just that was a weird episode in my life, and just watching things happen. Essentially, junior high school, I had zero foundation. So usually what they say in trauma is there's capital T traumas, which are events that happen to you, and then there's lower T traumas, which is just living in a chaotic environment.
Right.
I was kind of dealing with both. Ultimately, about age 19 or 20, I barely graduated high school, was doing nothing with my life. Attempted community college, but dropped out after a few weeks because it was just too hard, and I had no why. I had no reason to do it, and I had no confidence or skill to even read a textbook.
Right.
And so I was playing World of Warcraft all day, living at my cousin's house, doing nothing, and ultimately decided to leave. My younger brother, he ended up joining the military. I ended up actually serving a church mission. To me, that was the way out. I left, ended up living in Pittsburgh for a few years, and ultimately doing a lot of community service, reading a lot of books. I ended up having good leaders that helped me to unload a lot of the trauma and baggage from my past and helped me to figure out a future. And so that was really the big one. That experience really opened me up, and I saw a lot of things that I'd never seen before. I was in the ghettos of Pittsburgh, doing community service and just being in people's houses and trying to help people overcome their obstacles. That experience was great for me. And I really learned how to journal, and I read so many great books. But that's kind of what set me off on my path. When I came back home, it was obvious to me that the people in my life couldn't comprehend the changes I had gone through.
Right.
They
saw you as who you were when you left.
Yeah, they could only see and relate to my former self. And to me, that person was no longer me. And so I felt like I needed to go do different things, continue to surround myself in new environments. I really like the quote from Dan Sullivan, surround yourself with people who remind you more of your future than your past.
Yeah.
And so I just kept going. I wanted to continue to study psychology. I wanted to continue to understand how this stuff worked. And so I ended up, getting a PhD. And I think that was the big pivotal experience. Obviously, I've read probably 1,000 books since then. We've, went through the foster care crazy experience of, doing 3 years of foster care and eventually adopting those kids and now having 2 others. And so there's just been a lot of huge pivotal events in my life. And I continue to seek those, to be honest with you. I know that, as I talk about in the book, my future self is hopefully a much better and more mature and expanded version of my current self. And so I want to go through transformational experiences in my future that update even who I am today.
Well, let's talk about that, right? So in your new book, personality isn't permanent, right? I love that as a title of thought provoking. You know, you talk a lot about your future self and being intentional about creating your goals and desires and being that future self. So what does your future self look like? How do you paint that for yourself? Like, I know you go into a lot in the book and I don't want to reveal it. Let's let people go
We can
read it.
reveal it. Let's reveal it, baby.
You know, I want people to read it, but I want to, so how do you put those practices that you share in the book, how do you put them into practice, and what does your future self look like?
I love it. Well, let me just first tell your amazing listeners, there's a lot of good findings in psychology these days about, first off, I think, for example, like, I'm guessing you would argue that your current self is a little different than who you were 5 or 10 years ago.
Oh yeah, totally.
Right. And I think your listeners would probably agree. And so it's like, you've gone through a lot. You don't see the world the same way. You have different preferences. You tolerate different things. Maybe there's certain things you don't tolerate anymore that you used to tolerate.
Absolutely.
And so you prefer things now that maybe you didn't prefer back then. And so it's really good, first off, from an identity perspective, to recognize that your current self is different from your former self, and that your current self is also different from your future self, and that your future self is a different person. And so they would make different decisions, and hopefully they see the world differently and hopefully better. Like, it's good for decision making, but it's also essential to engage in true learning, what psychologists call deliberate practice. You have to have that future self in mind. And so this is where you begin living intentionally, is defining your future identity, like defining their attributes, their characteristics, their situation, what they're up to, what they care about, how their life is different. Like, you can't really start a goal-driven path without first starting with your future identity. And so that's kind of the key. And I can explain how I've applied it.
I do want to know how you've applied it, but I just had a thought that came to me. For someone who this might be like a totally foreign concept, I was just thinking, what came to me is, some people understand marketing. They understand today that you create a marketing avatar for the person that you are selling to. Well, it's kind of the same. You're creating your future avatar, right? So you're defining who that person is, what they do, what they think about, what they buy, who they hang out with. So actually, if for people who are listening, if this is like blowing your mind, weird concept, that just puts it into something maybe they can understand, since there's a lot of entrepreneurs.
I love that, and I'll state bluntly, I'm an entrepreneur, and it's funny actually that we'll spend so much time crafting and honing the avatar for our buyers, and we won't craft the avatar for our future identity. You know what I mean? Because your future self is hopefully who you're becoming. It's impossible to live intentionally on a daily basis unless you're walking towards someone.
And I think the challenge that people might have with that, because it's intangible, like it hasn't happened yet, right? And so they have to visualize, and not everybody is good at you have to practice visualizing into
everything you're saying is brilliant, and it's important. So I'll give a little resource. There's like probably even a 6-minute TED Talk called The Psychology of Your Future Self. It's by Dr. Daniel Gilbert. Very good little primer, 6 minutes. But basically what he helps people understand is that one of the reasons why we don't visualize and imagine a future self is because it's a lot easier to remember the past than to imagine the future. And so what we do is we look to the past and we use that as the basis of our identity, rather than getting better and better at thinking about and imagining a future version of us. When you become increasingly confident, confidence is kind of one of the keys to imagination. And so confidence allows you to think about who you could be or what you could do, and it allows you to have a lot more flexibility with your current identity. And so one of the key things, and again, I'm trying to hit this, is that your current self is different from your future self. And so you shouldn't overly value your current perspective, because, like as Stephen Covey said, we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. Right. And so your current self—
oh, it's so tight.
and this is why labeling is so negative, is because when you hold on to a label, then that becomes the basis for how you decide a future. It's a lot better to really think about and be honest about who would you like to be, or what would you like to have? What would you, if you were just totally honest, and this could be a little difficult and scary, and I fully own this. It can be a little difficult and scary to actually genuinely think about and imagine, and maybe journal about or tell people about who you really want to be or what you really want to be doing with your life. Chances are maybe you've had negative experiences in the past that have led you to limiting what you would be willing to try because of painful traumas or just negative experiences in the past, or failures that have led you to maybe not being willing to genuinely pursue what you would want. There's a great quote.
Believe that it's possible, right? Because your past is limiting you, then you're feeling like, a lot of people feel like, well, that's not real. That I don't believe that. I can say
Yep.
that, I can say an affirmation, but I don't believe it in my heart.
True. 100%. And I acknowledge that.
How do they do that? Let's talk about that. Because like you said, they can get caught up in a label, and personality isn't permanent. Those personality types are giving you that label, telling this is who you are. So we have all these tools that are keeping us where we are, right? So what's a tool or a way that we can let it go and open up a way to believe and step into that future self?
Yeah, there's lots of tools, and the tools involve both the past and the future. So I'll give you a few tools that you could use that will help you with the future, and a couple tools that you're going to have to use to reframe your past, because your past is generally, you have a past. We all have a past. And that past is probably impacting your current decisions, maybe in ways that you don't want it to. And so it's important to know that your past is not actually fixed. Your past is a perspective. So just like the Covey quote that says you don't see the world as it is, but you see the world as you are. That same quote is true of the past. You don't see your past as it is, you see it as you are. So I think first things first, asking yourself, how did you become the person you are? And why have you chosen the life you've started to choose? Usually you could look back and you can think of a few pivotal events that have led you to seeing the world the way you see it, or maybe events that led you to changing your course, or redirecting your focus.
Yeah.
So thinking about those events, maybe those most hard or traumatic or difficult things that you've gone through. And there's a few things you got to do. The first thing you got to do is obviously you've got to be willing to confront those experiences. You could confront them by yourself. So there's in psychology, there's two ideas. One is exposure therapy, which is that the more you expose yourself to something, the more you neutralize the emotions. So by simply thinking about and talking about these experiences, the emotions can dissipate. If the past is still emotional, then that means it's driving you. What you want is you want to turn the past from emotion to information.
Right.
If it's information, you can use it. And so you want to get more context, I'll give you a few thoughts. First off, journal. Second off, talk to people about it. When you journal about it, you can then think about it from different angles. Like I like journaling with questions. So as an example, how would a different person view this experience? Like, if I'm thinking about like my parents' divorce, or I'm thinking about my dad as a drug addict, I'm like, how would a different person see this experience? How would my future self see this experience? Or how did my dad see this experience? So one of the things that you want to do is you want to get more information and more context and different perspectives about this event. One of the things I had to do to gain more experience or more perspective is literally ask my dad. We've become friends over the years, and he's totally changed his life. He's no longer a drug addict, but I had to ask him, like, Dad, during this episode of our lives, like what led you to some of the decisions you made, and what was it like for you, and what was it like? Just getting more information. So I'll tell a quick story because this is key.
Okay.
And I think you'll dig this because it's not in the book.
So I will dig it.
Go ahead.
I want you to tell the story, and I want to just go back for a second for the listeners.
Yeah, we can go whatever order you want. Whatever order you want.
No, it's good. We're gonna come to that. So what I wanted to just highlight and repeat, because I think repetition is key, right? Is what you said, that to asking yourself those questions, even from a third party, because they're going to see it from a different perspective. Whether you directly ask the third party, like you said, you asked your dad, you got curious and you had somebody to ask, but sometimes you can just put a different hat on and play a role play, right? Salespeople do it all the time. Hey, if I'm the buyer and I'm talking to you, what's my reaction going to be? And it gives you a whole different perspective. I know that when I'm coaching other coaches, I'll ask them, what would you coach someone else, right? Because they would see the situation differently if they were looking at it by coaching someone else.
By the way, you're a great coach. I can already tell. No, just how you're coaching us through this conversation is really cool. No, so what you've just brought up is a quote that just triggered me. But this quote is, "You can't read the label from inside the jar."
Yes,
right?
I've heard that.
And so the idea is that a third-party perspective is almost always a nice way to reframe your current perspective, because you're inside the jar. You were the one who saw these experiences and you had an emotional reaction. And so you're usually viewing your experience from the initial reaction, but sometimes it's nice to get out of the jar and get a different perspective. And you can do that, again, in the journal by just asking yourself theoretical questions. how would a third party person have seen this experience? You know, how would I choose to see this experience if I was an adult watching a kid go through this experience? You know, just like seeing it from different angles.
Absolutely. It's so key. So I just wanted to repeat that for
I
people.
think that it's
The value
brilliant.
of
Keep
spending
doing that, because you're obviously a really good coach. I love it. No, seriously, I'm being completely honest. Like you're very good at highlighting key things.
well, thank you. Thank you. I love it too, right? We're both passionate about this work.
Yeah, no, it's fun.
That's what makes it cool. And so these are great tools, right? And journaling. So, and then we'll close that and we'll go to your story. The thing I love about journaling too is your idea of starting with questions gives you that direction, because some people just don't feel comfortable to go to a white piece of paper and just write. So those questions give some great guidance.
They're a nice prompt.
And what I love too is because I'm a big word fanatic. So because our words will tell us a lot about our unconscious and what we're thinking. So I encourage people when they're journaling to go back and read it and circle the positive words and or I call them productive and unproductive words. Like, where do you see yourself hung up? Like you said, that emotion. And then that'll give you some indication too about what it is you're really feeling. Because when you're writing, you're not when you're in the flow, you're not like purposefully making it like perfect. You're giving the real, like, from your heart, and it's just flowing.
Yeah,
And
no one's going to read it. No one needs to read it. You can burn it or throw it away if you want. Just write genuinely about the experience and how it impacted you and about how you view it right now, and then maybe start thinking about it from different angles.
Exactly. So those are some really simple and great tips for people. So tell us the story, and I love that
I'll tell you the story, and it ties in with everything we're talking about, because these thoughts are not finished yet. The journaling and also talking to other people about it, these are not fully developed thoughts yet. The story will help understand it though. So this is a story about my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law was recently at the gym, and she was working out, and there was a very heavy woman in the gym, very overweight, obese woman exercising in the gym, and this woman happened to be wearing very tightly fitted clothing. And it was a little awkward for a lot of people. My mother-in-law could tell that there were people judging this woman, and kind of, she could just see the situation. And she
Right.
also had her own potential judgmental thoughts. Well, my mother-in-law happened to be working out next to this woman, like on a machine next to her, and they were struck up a conversation. And my mother-in-law found out that over the last 6 or so months, this woman has lost 150 pounds.
Wow.
So my question for you is, if that's true, does that change how you view this woman at all?
Right.
Does it?
For me?
Yeah, like if you found out that this woman lost 150 pounds in the last 6 months, would that change anything about your perspective of this woman?
It would, but my perspective was already different. So I'm a master reframer. So my perspective was, that's awesome that she is there and she's
100%. I love that.
so,
And you are a master reframer.
so I don't, but my next thought is, for somebody like that, is how inspiring. Like, it does change my thought, but even more so, like, at first I'm impressed that she's there and she's really putting the effort in. And then secondly, to know that she's lost 150 pounds is inspiring. Like,
Well, so
I
let's
have
just
more conversation and hear, her story, because I think that the human spirit is amazing. And I love to hear people's stories.
I love you more and more as you talk. So what I love about what you just said is that when you see a person like this in the gym, you're inspired because you're like, wow, this person, what I see is this person's striving towards a future self. Like, this person's acting incredibly courageously, right?
Yes.
I think what a lot of people would be, maybe an easy initial reaction to this woman is like, well, this is awkward. Why is this woman wearing such tightly fitted clothing? From an inspirational perspective, it's like, wow, like this woman is acting as her future self. But like, initial reactions for a lot of people would be like, maybe judgmental, like, this is a little awkward or weird. And if they find out that this woman has just lost 150 pounds over the recent past, often that new context changes their perspective.
Sure.
Usually it's like, you go from maybe judging this woman or being critical or like, whatever, to being inspired, as you just said. And so you're looking at the same woman, but with that new piece of information, all of a sudden you see, what this story is an example of is that context is a lot more important than content. And by getting additional context, you actually see things differently. And so this is, when I was talking to my dad, as an example, I got different context. you can journal in such a way and even reframe as you've described to get different contexts so that you're looking at something differently. I mean, Wayne Dyer said, when you change the way you see something, you change the way, when you change the way you see something, the thing you're looking at changes, right? Um, and so you have to realize that you're looking at former events, negative experiences from a perspective. And when you get a different perspective, you'll change how you see those events. And you can become very strategic about changing your memories, changing how you feel about those memories, changing the emotion behind those memories, and even framing negative events from a positive perspective. And actually, that's a very powerful thing to do. And you can then shape your narrative and your story around your past in a very positive way. Like, I'll just tell you, like, I view my past very positively. I don't believe it's limiting me in any way. In fact, I believe it's propelling my life forward, and I'm grateful for it. But I'm also very empathetic towards my father because of the information I've gotten, and knowing that there's reasons why he was the way he was, and there's things. The way I was looking at it for so long was from the perspective of an 11-year-old kid who didn't know what was going on.
Right.
I'm hopefully now seeing it from the perspective of a 30-year-old person who has a great relationship with my dad and who can see that event from a different perspective. And so I don't want to be stuck in the jar of the 11-year-old kid. I want to get out of that jar and continue to upgrade my perspective.
Right. So I asked you a question earlier. I want to come back to that.
Let's do it.
We're also going to go into a part two. So I asked you what your future self looks like. So take us there.
I will take you
How many
there.
years in the future? Give us the visual and the audio and all that.
Okay. So yeah, my future. So just to give some people a situation on this call, I'm 32 years old, live in Florida, have 5 kids. So, and I write books. My future self in 3 or 4 years from now, and I am an entrepreneur. I do a lot of entrepreneurial activity. My future self will be doing actually a lot less entrepreneurial activity. So I will, be in a situation with a lot more financial freedom. Like I believe that this book will sell, and I'm planning on this book selling millions of copies. Like I'm pretty committed to that goal. I've set that goal because of the future self I want to become. Like, so my future self has a lot more freedom, but I'm actually going to be going back. I'm going to be doing a lot more missionary work, to be honest with you.
Oh, awesome.
I think I'm going to go towards a more spiritual perspective. That said, I'm still be writing business books. I'm going to still be writing self-improvement that are separate from that. And like, that's something I love doing, but I'm going to be doing a lot more missionary work from a leadership perspective. And so I want to be in a financial situation, and I want to prepare and situate my life and my family so that I can go do that in kind of really cool, powerful ways. And so I'm going to be spending more of my time doing that. Like,
so
financially, I'm going to be in a situation.
In this country, or is it in other countries? Like,
no clue.
Okay. So it's just overarching.
Yeah. I mean, like, I imagine I'm going to learn Spanish in the next few years. And so I'm open to that. But I'll be honest, I just love missionaries. Like, when I was a 19, 20-year-old kid, like, I was just learning so much, and I went through so much. And so a lot of what I've learned is so that I can positively influence that audience. Like, one of my favorite questions that Dan Sullivan asks is, who do you want to be a hero to? Like, that question is really clarifying for a purpose. Like, you really clarify your purpose when you can answer the question, who do you want to be a hero to? And you want to be a hero to this audience, you want to be a hero to the people that you serve, and you want to help them in certain ways. And like, I love helping people from a broad perspective to improve their lives. And I've spent years learning how to help people improve their lives. But a specific audience, my future self is going to be hero to are young missionaries, and helping them to be effective, because I just love that audience. And so I'll be in a place financially through the selling of these books and the other things I'll be doing in the next few years to do that full time. And I've already prepared my wife and my kids for this. Like, I'm like when I remember when I first told my wife, like, in the next 2 or 3 years, I'm going to stop doing a lot of what I'm doing. I'm going to be doing this. But because of that future goal, I'm going to get us into a certain situation, because your goal shapes your process, And so it's like, because this is what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to get us in this place so that not only it's possible, but so that it's okay for all of you. Initially, she was a little freaked out, but I'll be honest. When I first got married to my wife, even when we were dating, I told her some of my goals, and it freaked her out. Like, just totally freaked her out. And So she's kind of gotten used to like me saying like, okay, this is what I'm going to do next. And it freaks her out. And then she gets on board. And I think, and so, um, yeah, so that's,
I think it's always good when your goals freak you out.
yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Right? So if they're big enough, right, and they freak you
yeah.
out just a little bit, where
Yeah. I
you're
mean, I'll be
like
blunt.
a
I'll
little
be
nervous
blunt, you know,
about
because
actually doing it.
no, I'll be blunt. My future self is my future identity. It's my future situation. The goal to get there, which does freak me out, is to sell 10 million copies of this book.
Okay.
I have no clue how I'm going to do it. It's absurd and almost embarrassing if you actually understand the impossibility of that goal to say that. But
Well, and we're, in the name of reframing, there's so many different ways to sell a book today that weren't available before, because you've got audio, you've got, electronic versions, you've got the physical versions, you've got a distribution mechanism around the world. So, I believe that's
well,
totally
I'm
possible.
just telling you, I'm committed to making it happen because I'm so excited about my future self and about that situation, about what I'm doing. Just like I was excited to be in this situation. When I was a first year graduate student 5 years ago, I wanted to become a professional writer. I wanted to be writing for the big publishing houses. I
Mhm.
wanted to be making a good income and doing this with my time. And then I had to I had to, set a specific goal and reverse engineer that goal and become that human being, which is something I've done multiple times in my life. And so I'm what happens is because your future self is different from your current self, your future self is dealing with hopefully better situations and problems and relationships than your current self is. And like the things that I'm going to be doing in the short-term future are so exciting to me that it leads you to being radically committed to whatever goal you're doing. It's just fun.
Yeah. So, as I said, we're gonna break up this show into two shows. In the next show, I'd
Amazing.
like to talk about, you said, goals shape our process, and I want to talk a little bit more about goals and that piece of the element. But and there's a couple quotes in the book that I want to come back to in that segment, so we'll definitely do that.
Whatever you want to talk about, I'm just excited.
Yeah, and so, what in this segment, what's one of your the biggest learning that you got from writing this book, Personality Isn't Permanent?
I think that the big thing for me is not overly valuing my current perspective, not overly holding tight to my current identity, becoming a lot more flexible in how I view myself, and also just when you don't hold your current view too hard and your current identity too hard, then you can then be a lot more flexible in imagining a different version of yourself, and also imagining a different version of your former self, and about how that like. And so I think I've just gotten a lot more flexible, honestly, and it's led me to being a lot more intentional about goals and a lot more flexible in pursuing those goals, because pursuing big goals is often requires courage. It requires shifting how you do things, how you speak and communicate about yourself. And when you're not so tight on how you've defined yourself, but you still have principles and you have a why. It's not like you're just standing on sand. It allows you to not be as worried about how people think about you, how people define you, and you can just move forward faster and even let go of things faster. And as you said, reframe quicker
Absolutely.
and get information faster, change the content. And so I just hold my current self less tightly, knowing that it's going to change and knowing that I'm going to make it change.
Awesome. And by writing this book and really diving into Personality Isn't Permanent, how has that positively impacted the relationships in your life?
I think it's huge. It's huge because I think in relationships, it's easy to become dogmatic in how you see people. It's natural psychologically for us to develop kind of filters. And so like, my kids as an example, like it's easy for me to just assume that my 12-year-old son is acting how he always acts,
Mm-hmm.
um, rather than being mindful of the situation and also not putting him in a box in my own thinking and saying, "Oh, he always acts that way." Like, that's being mindless. And so I think I'm a lot more flexible with other people as well. And also, recognizing the change that does occur. I mean, a big aspect of this is taking a second to look at the current situation and realizing how different it actually is from the former situation, and actually taking a minute to recognize that change has occurred and that growth has happened. It's easy to have such tunnel vision that you don't even notice the change that's happened. To recognize that even in the last 3 to 6 months, you've changed or your kids have changed. And so I notice that more, and I appreciate it more, and I value. I think I just value my people more. I don't know.
Awesome. Well, I believe that's so. That's why I asked you, because I want everybody who's listening to tune in that this is not just a personal development that affects me and my relationship with myself. This is, a book that is going to impact not only your relationship with yourself, but your relationship with everyone else. Because when you become more flexible with yourself and you loosen up on labels and be able to reframe and get different perspectives, that affects everything. It improves your communication, which is the cornerstone of all relationships. So that's going to improve your sales. It's going to improve your family relationships. It's going to improve your friendships. So, so
It
that's why.
definitely will improve your sales. I know this is kind of a fine in an entrepreneurial situation, but I'll just say, over the last 2 or 3 years, my income has 10x'd. And it 10x'd before that. And I think it's powerful when you're not so rigid in how you see yourself, and when you then define who you want to be, and then put yourself in those environments, get that education, go through that learning, go through that change, shift your narrative. I mean, you can, if you're not good at sales right now, or if you don't think you are, you can easily become someone who's brilliant at sales. Like, that's the whole key, is that you would need to shape an identity of yourself as someone who's actually comfortable with that, and who wants it, and who loves it, and who enjoys doing it. Like, your current self may not enjoy that. My former self in 2015, when I first got my foster kids, did not enjoy being with my kids. I'm just being blunt. I did not enjoy being a father. I now enjoy that. Your preferences can change. And so you can choose your preferences. You can choose to become brilliant at selling. You can choose to develop a 7-figure income, and so that's just the key, is who do you want to be, and then how do you become that person?
Awesome. Thank you, Benjamin, so much for being here today.
You're welcome.
And thank you all. And like Benjamin Hardy said, it is your choice. So go out and get that book if you don't already have it, and make sure that you're taking advantage of all the golden nuggets that are in that book. So my name is Penny Zenker. This is Take Back Time, and I'll see you in the next episode.
You're epic, Penny.